The smell of rusted metal and sweat clung to the air long after the lights went out on Rikers Island. For most men, the gates were a dead end. But for one inmate, they looked like a challenge waiting to be solved. He called himself Smoke. Nobody knew his real name, and nobody asked. On Rikers, questions were currency, and the wrong one could get you hurt. Smoke had been inside for 8 months on a robbery charge, but it wasn't the sentence that kept him up at night. It was the noise, the endless slamming of bars, the guards' boots echoing through cold hallways, the whispers about men who tried to break free and disappeared for good. If stories like this fascinate you, hit subscribe, because this one only gets darker. Rikers Island wasn't just a jail, it was a maze of concrete and control, an entire city of chaos built on the East River. Every inmate had a dream of leaving. Some wrote letters, some prayed. Smoke planned. He studied guard rotations, memorized shift changes, and watched which lights flickered first when the power dipped during storms. His cellmate, Jalen, was the only one who knew. A kid barely 21, doing time for possession. He didn't have the stomach for risk, but he had connections, an uncle who worked in maintenance before getting locked up himself. From Jalen came the key detail: one of the older tunnels beneath the laundry block hadn't been sealed right since the 1980s. They called it the Ghost Run. It was an old supply passage used before the facility expanded, buried and forgotten. Guards said it was filled with rats, mold, and bad memories. But Smoke saw a map. He could smell air coming from somewhere deeper. Each night, when the count was called and the lights dimmed, he'd press his ear against the floor, feeling for the faint vibration of passing trucks above. Freedom had a sound, and he was learning its rhythm. Still, Rikers didn't sleep easy. The COs, correction officers, kept a sharp eye on anyone who walked too straight or smiled too long. And when a sudden fight broke out in the yard one afternoon, Smoke realized how thin the line between life and discovery really was. The brawl started between rival crews, Harlem against Brooklyn, the usual script. But Smoke saw something else. The guards had left their post by the laundry wing earlier than usual. For 7 minutes, the cameras faced the wrong way. 7 minutes of chaos. 7 minutes of opportunity. That night, Smoke and Jalen moved. Using a smuggled wrench wrapped in cloth, they pried open a rusted grate near the boiler room and slipped through, heartbeats pounding louder than the sirens they feared would follow. The tunnel was darker than ink, filled with dripping pipes and the stench of rot. They crawled through sludge, hands trembling, every sound echoing like a gunshot. Halfway through, Jalen froze. "You hear that?" It wasn't footsteps. It was humming, mechanical, constant, alive. Smoke turned toward the faint glow at the tunnel's end. There it was, a maintenance gate. On the other side, faint city light flickered through cracks. Freedom. But before they could reach it, a blinding beam cut through the dark. "Freeze! Don't move!" The sound of boots thundered behind them. Jalen panicked, slipping into the filth. Smoke looked back, 4 guards in riot gear, rifles raised. And yet, the gate ahead wasn't locked. Smoke hesitated only once. Then he ran. The tunnel erupted with shouting, boots pounding, a warning siren echoing through the underground corridor. And as he slammed his shoulder into the rusted gate, it gave way, just as a deafening alarm lit up the entire island. When the alarm went off that night, Rikers Island shook like a war zone. Floodlights blazed across the yard, dogs barked from every corner, and the loudspeakers screamed for lockdown. But somewhere beneath that chaos, beneath 100 layers of concrete and panic, Smoke was still moving. He didn't look back. Not at Jalen. Not at the guards' voices echoing down the tunnel. He just ran toward the faint pulse of night air bleeding through the cracks. His shoulder burned from the hit, and his lungs scraped like glass, but for the first time in 8 months, he felt something close to life. Above him, officers sealed every block. The warden, a man named McCormick, known for his obsession with order, stormed into the control tower, demanding answers. How the hell did he get past the boilers? He barked. No one had an answer. Nobody ever did at Rikers. If you think you've seen every kind of chaos on this island, McCormick once told a rookie guard, wait until someone tries to leave it. And now, someone had. Smoke reached the end of the tunnel, pushing open the grate to find himself behind the outer wall, just yards from the shore. The East River glistened under the moonlight, a cruel mirage of freedom. The fence stood between him and the world, 30 feet of steel topped with razor wire. He could hear the city on the other side, the distant hum of traffic, a ferry horn cutting through the night. It was right there. Then came the helicopter. The searchlight hit the ground like a white explosion. Smoke dove behind a barrel, pressing his face into the mud as voices shouted from the watchtower. He waited. 1 minute. 2. Then silence, broken only by the hum of the chopper fading back toward the main yard. He moved again. Fast. Silent. A shadow among shadows. But inside, the real storm was brewing. Jalen hadn't made it out of the tunnel. He was caught halfway, dragged out by officers who didn't ask questions before swinging batons. By dawn, word had spread, Smoke tried to bounce. The inmates talked in code, but everyone knew what it meant. And in a place like Rikers, news didn't just travel, it mutated. Some said Smoke made it to the river and vanished. Others said he was dead. Warden McCormick didn't believe either. He wanted proof. He sent a team of officers down to the maintenance corridors the next morning, ordering them to trace every inch. What they found was worse than an escape, it was an exposure. The tunnel had been known to a handful of maintenance staff for years. They'd sealed it on paper, but never in reality. Some even joked about it over coffee. But now that oversight had turned into a scandal waiting to explode. McCormick gathered his senior officers that night. "We shut this down quietly," he said. "No press. No paperwork. No transfers." But it was too late. A female CO named Rivera had seen the whole thing. She'd been working the laundry block that night when the alarms went off. She knew something didn't add up. The camera facing the boiler room had been manually disabled 10 minutes before the breakout. That wasn't coincidence. When she asked her supervisor about it, he told her to forget what she saw. She didn't. Rivera started digging, reviewing maintenance logs, duty rosters, camera reports. What she found pointed to something much bigger than one man's escape attempt. A pattern. The same guards had swapped shifts 3 nights in a row. The same section had been offline for electrical maintenance twice in a month. And the same inmate had been moved into that cell block right before it all began. Someone had wanted Smoke exactly where he was. Rivera didn't know why, but she was about to find out. Because the next morning, when she arrived for her shift, her locker was open. Inside was a single folded note, written in tiny, careful handwriting. "If you want the truth about Rikers, meet me where the tunnel ends." The morning Rivera followed the note, Rikers Island looked calm, too calm. The air was heavy, the kind of silence that came after storms and before cover-ups. She moved past the yard, through the service corridors, down toward the boiler room where the escape had started. Her badge gave her access, but her nerves made her hesitate. The tunnel gaped before her, dark and dripping, like the throat of the island itself. The smell of rust and wet concrete clung to everything. She clicked on her flashlight and stepped inside. If stories like this pull you in, hit subscribe, because this ending changes everything. The deeper she went, the louder the island seemed to breathe. Pipes groaned above her, rats scurried through the shadows. And then she saw it, muddy footprints, fresh ones, leading away from the grate where the escape had ended. She froze. It wasn't possible. Every officer swore Smoke never made it past the wall. But those prints said otherwise. They led her to the far end of the tunnel, to a small maintenance room lined with old generator parts and corroded tools. On the floor sat a folded piece of gray prison cloth, torn, stained, unmistakably part of an inmate's jumpsuit. And beside it, another note. "They used me to test the system. The words hit like a punch. Rivera's mind ran through every report she'd seen: shift changes, camera outages, falsified inspection logs. Someone inside the department had orchestrated this. Not to help Smoke escape, but to see if he could. She didn't realize she was being watched. From the shadows behind her, a voice said quietly, "You shouldn't be here, officer." Rivera turned, flashlight trembling. It was Captain Doyle, McCormick's right-hand man. His uniform was crisp, but his face was hard, eyes cold. "You think this place runs on lock?" he said. "We run simulations. Controlled breaches. We find the weak points before the wrong people do." Her heart pounded. "So you let an inmate risk his life?" Doyle's expression didn't flicker. He volunteered. "Some men would do anything for a deal. You think we picked him by chance?" Rivera realized then, Smoke's escape wasn't rebellion, it was an experiment. A quiet test of the island's failing systems. They never expected him to survive. But Smoke had outsmarted them. Rivera took a step back. "Where is he?" Doyle's lips curved into something between a smirk and a warning. "Off the island. That's all you need to know." He turned and started walking away, his boots echoing down the tunnel. Rivera stood frozen, her mind spinning. She should report this, but who would she tell? The warden? The same man who ordered the silence? That night, she filed her resignation. Within 24 hours, her name was removed from the department roster. A week later, her phone rang once, a blocked number, no message left. But in a small park across the East River, a man wearing a hood sat quietly on a bench, watching the water move. His face was thin, his eyes tired, but the faintest trace of a scar still cut across his shoulder. Smoke didn't speak to anyone. Didn't run. Didn't hide. He just watched the horizon, where the island lights flickered faintly in the distance like a bad dream that refused to fade. They thought he'd died in the tunnel. They thought the story had ended. But some stories don't end, they just disappear where no one looks. If you think this story was intense, the next one will leave you speechless. Subscribe for more true crime stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat.